welcome to this event. This event, we normally do it just before graduation, the formal graduation that takes place within the faculty, at least to honor some of the students that we have. We always have an event for the LLB, but also for the research students, especially the doctoral students. Welcome to members of the family who are also joining this event to support their loved ones who have qualified with the PhD degree or a master's by research. Today at 7:30, I think there will be the formal online graduation. For those with PhDs, you'll be called doctor only after that event, not before then. We have 16 graduates with PhDs, which is a first in the faculty at one sitting to have such large a number of PhD graduates. We have 71 LLMs and MPhils, 1 postgraduate diploma, and 3 LLB graduates, students graduating today. So to have 16 PhD graduates shows during this difficult time how hard all of you have worked who are graduating. You've spent many years studying, focusing on your thesis. Sometimes it was frustrating. Sometimes you felt like giving up. Sometimes you felt like the world was fighting against you, whether it was a supervisor or whether it was circumstances, but you persevered through all that. Only certain people can do the PhD. It requires a certain amount of commitment and application, focus, and resilience that no other qualification entails. And so on behalf of the faculty, I would like to congratulate all of you for reaching this point. We always wanted to reach this point. It was always at the back of our minds from the moment you were admitted to the PhD program, or whether it is the LLM program. We always wanted to get to this point, despite all the doubts that might have arisen along the way. Now, to reach this point, of course, it's largely because of your hard work, because of your commitment, but it is also because of some people who supported you, especially members of your family who stood by while you were so busy, focused on this, and they took up some of the responsibilities that you had. There are also the supervisors, of course, who actually spend a lot of time reading through the work that you submitted, but also widely on the topic in cases where the supervisor doesn't feel comfortable, thinking with you, testing your ideas, and providing guidance. That takes a lot of work. So I would like to also acknowledge and thank all the supervisors. Some of them are in this room, some not. Of course, you also received a lot of support from members of the support staff, especially Ms. Patricia Phillips, who looked after you during the course of your studies at UCT, and many other people who have supported you. Of course, this event is organized by Gabby, Ms. Gabby Ritchie. Thank you very much for making this possible, making it possible for us to acknowledge the achievements of our graduating students. With these remarks, I will ask Professor P.J. Schwickard to make a few remarks on postgraduate, the postgraduate endeavor. After that, we'll go into introducing each of the graduating doctoral students. PJ, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, to all today's graduates for giving us reason to truly celebrate in these very difficult times. Postgraduate studies are never easy. They require you to set out on a journey to explore the unknown. It is often a lonely journey, and that's one of the reasons why many choose to do a master's involving coursework. But for the last 2 years, the absence of a physical classroom has meant that whatever postgraduate path you chose, it was a lonely one. But despite that, you succeeded. You should carry your heads high and know that you have the grit and determination to not only overcome the additional burdens imposed by this pandemic, psychological and financial, but that you have fortitude to overcome whatever challenges lie ahead. When I refer to a lonely journey, I mean lonely in the sense that the weight of academic endeavor will always rest primarily on the shoulders of the postgraduate candidate. However, most often a support team plays a very important role. The composition of support teams vary, and it may consist of family, friends, mentors, and of course supervisors. Your loved ones may have supported you both materially and emotionally, sometimes giving up financial security and family time. So today we celebrate not only the graduates, but also their support teams and their supervisors. Having completed a postgraduate degree in law or in the related social sciences, today as a graduate, you are in a unique position to help others. People, institutions, and organizations may all benefit from your endeavors to find new information, new ways of using old knowledge, to understand seemingly unresolvable problems, and to search for solutions to those problems. You have raised your level of expertise, and those of you who have completed the longest journey of all, PhD, can consider yourselves experts in your field. Research at both master's and doctoral level plays an indispensable role in the transmission of knowledge. Not only may it be used to develop policies and to change practices, but it also provides a base from which others may work. Just as you are indebted to those whose work you relied on, future researchers will be indebted to you. Research output is inevitably a collective endeavor that is timeless. Thank you all for your very important contribution to knowledge. In your undergraduate degrees, you developed a wide set of transferable skills, including the ability to communicate and articulate complex thoughts, both verbally and in writing, the ability to find the necessary information to answer difficult questions. These have been honed in your postgraduate studies, and you are even better placed to make a difference. You now have the skills and knowledge to thrive on your chosen path. Now, sometimes when you reach a major goal, the adrenaline drains, and strangely, self-doubt might set in. For those of you who might be experiencing this, remember that it is inevitable that the more we learn, the more we become aware of what we don't know. And in a way, that is the wonderful thing about expanding the boundaries of knowledge. It is a lifelong, exciting challenge. Of course, you are an expert. Just think back to what you did not know before you embarked on your postgraduate journey. You have contributed to the world's knowledge base. You should take time to enjoy the acknowledgement by your loved ones who have supported you in your journey, and the acknowledgement of your peers and the academic community. Congratulations, today you are superstars. I now hand you back to the Dean and to your supervisors who have walked with you every step of the way and whom we also celebrate today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, PJ, for those words. Now we will move to introducing each doctoral graduate, and the supervisor will introduce the person. So what I will ask is if the supervisor will put on a video camera also, and then the graduate must also put on a video so we can see, and then the supervisor will introduce. We'll start with Chris Adamako Kwake, who was supervised by Professors Henry Mostert and Associate Professor Tracy Gutuza. Who is speaking? Is it Henry? Who is going to introduce? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Professor Cherba, and congratulations to Chris Adamako Kwake from KNUST in Ghana. Thank you very much for this opportunity to bring him some praise and honor. Chris was a doctoral student of myself and Tracy Kutuza for the past 4 years. I have a quite rigorous set of rules of how students are to behave when they wish to be supervised, and I must say Chris has been exemplary in meeting all of the rules, in meeting all of the deadlines that have ever been set for him. I don't think he has ever been late in any of his submissions. Chris has always struck me as the epitome of a gentleman. He has a very kind, good-natured way of responding to people, always extremely controlled, and never out of anger or any such explosive emotions. And what makes this so much more noteworthy is the topic that Chris has chosen for his thesis required him to be critical, very critical, of some practices, legislative and government practices in the area which he studied, which had to do with revenue, management of revenue in Ghana. And it was always such a pleasure to see Chris shooting firebolts at the institutions that have to clean up their acts in order to manage the resources and the resource revenue of Africa in better ways. I could not have been blessed more, but with the privilege of having been able to co-supervise this particular student. Very proud of his achievement. Well done, Chris. We will call you Doctor from now on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. I'm also grateful for the assistance and the guidance you gave me together with Tracy.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Thanks, Henry. Thanks, Chris. The next will be Christian Ziberu Banda, and was supervised by Professor Ferris, who is DVC Emeritus.
I didn't know that was a term, DVC Emeritus.
It's such a term.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to introduce you very briefly the work that Gratian has done over the last few years. And I have to say it was truly an honor to supervise Gratian for this thesis that looked at the interface between development policy, equity, and climate change. And Gratian critiqued contemporary notions of development and development policy, and particularly looked at the negative implications for the application of equity norms, despite the fact that the Malawian constitution actually has equity as the basis for policy making. And so he made the point, I think, very articulately, that climate change has exposed and exacerbated the limitations of the current regulatory framework to actually deliver on equitable development. And so he argues that the climate change problem should, however, be used as an opportunity to facilitate diverse participation in environmental regulation by emphasizing development losses associated with climate change. And so he advocates for climate justice infused with equity norms to facilitate a responsive and climate change regulatory framework. Gretchen, I know that this journey of really this wonderful thesis that you've delivered was not an easy journey for you. However, I think that you should rest assured that all of the personal and professional sacrifices you made during this journey was definitely worthwhile, as evidenced, I guess, from the feedback that we got from the examiners, which was really very, very, very positive. So I salute you and I admire you for the effort that you've put in, sometimes with what Gretchen very diplomatically calls gentle nudging from my side when his enthusiasm ebbed. But I do believe that as a supervisor, the nudging will only make a difference if there's real commitment. And Gretchen, you certainly had commitment in spades. Thank you for the opportunity to walk this journey with you. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you for that, Loretta. The next is Karina Brewer, who was supervised by Professor Irina van der Spy and Dr. Mark Shaw. Irina, I saw you in the room.
I don't see her now, Dean.
Let's then I'll go to Neka, Cecilia Esomeju. We'll come back to Karina. I'll find out from Irina. So Neka Cecilia Esomeju, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, was supervised by Associate Professors Johan Hatting and Tracy Gutuza. Tracy is in the room, I think.
Yes, she is. She is.
Yes.
In the room,
Yeah.
So
I'm putting the sound is there, but we can't see you.
I did put my camera on, but yeah, my bandwidth is a bit, so just stay with me. If it comes up. But I'm really proud to be introducing Jetta, who supervised with Johan. I was the supervisor, Johan was the supervisor. So I suppose, congrats in that way to Johan as well. Neka worked while physically present here in Cape Town and sat in some of my tax lectures. And I really appreciated Neka's input on that. Neka works for the Revenue Authority. So in that sense, I suppose her thesis is very much to her. Which looks particularly at Nigeria's process and looking at how one, the tax disputes and whether or not one is tax court, and looking at that in the context of Nigerian history and how the legal system evolved around tax disputes. With that tax, there's nice detail that around the development of tax courts. Her findings in effect that one needs to reform the Nigerian system and to amend the Nigerian laws, a resolution system in place for tax systems. It's really practical work, sort of procedural work, and will add great value to the development of dispute resolution in both Nigeria and South Africa, and then I think in the African context as well. So congratulations, Neka. I'm waiting to call yourself doctor. You can do so and put that title behind your name. Congratulations.
Thank you, Tracy. I see that Gratian has just joined us. You've been introduced already. If you could just show your face via your camera. Professor Ferris has already spoken to you, to us about your thesis and your journey. Are you able to just show your camera? Okay, I don't see him. The next is Jane Zirigwe, who will be was supervised by Professors Jan Grazeski and Professor Ferris, of course. I see Professor Ferris is here. You may introduce Jane.
Thank you very much, Dean. So, of course, normally when you are the co-supervisor, you don't always get to work very closely with the student that is being supervised by the main supervisor. But Jane diligently attended my monthly meetings that I have with my graduate students. And so I actually got to know Jane very well and kind of walked the same journey that I would have walked with her had I been the main supervisor. And so Jane focused in her thesis on conflict that arises between farmers and pastoralists in Nigeria. And she looked at this from a natural resources governance perspective. And I think Jane would agree that it took us quite a bit of effort to kind of nail this topic down and to actually focus where it needed to be focused. But wow, once we did that, Jane just kind of flew through this thesis. And so her thesis illustrated that the lack of a robust and sustainable governance regime on pastoralism contributes significantly to the continuing conflict in Nigeria between farmers and pastoralists. And so using socio-legal methods, she conducted research and gathered empirical data in 2 provinces to demonstrate how the issues that emanate from the gaps in governance actually influence the patterns of interaction that consequently causes the conflict. And here I must just pause to say that Jane returned from her research with some really harrowing stories of personal threats to herself during this research. So we admire Jane for her courage, and we're really grateful that she survived to tell the story of these communities that she worked with. And so some of the major findings includes the poor operationalization of the principle of stakeholder participation in lawmaking, the lack of legal clarity in regulation, poor interagency cooperation, and how all of these result in conflicting regulations and the informalization of security groups. So her thesis recommends conflict prevention mechanisms in the governance framework, poverty mitigation interventions, and inclusive participation, especially of women and of youth. So Jane, congratulations, and I want to commend you for this research. I know that you feel quite passionately about this topic, and I sincerely hope that your work will contribute to finding peaceful solutions to this ongoing conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ferris. The next is Juliet Gudo, who was supervised by Professor Ada Odo. Juliet, I don't know whether, yeah, you are here. You can put on your camera, and Professor Odo will introduce you. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. First, my apologies. Can I switch on my camera a little later? Where I am now, I can't switch it on. There's a lot going on in the background. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Dean. So the words that come to mind when I think about Juliet and how she pursued this research are hardworking, diligent, persevering, level-headed. Juliet understands and follows instructions, and she is gifted with high academic ability, which she has learned to put to optimal use and has done so in this case. Juliet's graduation story has been featured on the UCT website, bearing testimony to these attributes that I have mentioned. She has worked her way through many impediments early on in life to get to where she is now. And Juliet's research has much food for thought to offer all who are concerned with maladministration in state-owned enterprises. She dedicated the past 4 years to studying the use of legal provisions by civil society organizations to confront poor governance in state-owned enterprises in South Africa. It is a topical issue and with which a broad spectrum of society can identify. And so I think, Juliet, your thesis, your hard work over these past 4 years have placed you at the center of what's going on, both in South Africa and more widely on the African continent, and indeed globally, as illustrations and comparative examples that you used in your thesis clearly shows. So well done, we congratulate you, and we urge you to enjoy a restful and refreshing Christmas after what has been a really, really turbulent year. Congratulations, enjoy.
Thank you, Ada. The next is Conrad Hagenmeyer. I don't see Conrad here. Was supervised by Professor Kalula and Professor David. I do not see also Professor Kalula in the room. So we can go to the next, who's Joanne Harding, was supervised by Professor D. Smythe, and Professor Smythe is here.
Thank you, Danwood. So Jo Harding's dissertation is titled Women's Legal Consciousness in a Poor Urban Community, Finding Order in and Around the Law. It's a qualitative empirical study that investigates the legal consciousness of women in a poor urban community. And Jo Harding is well qualified to have embarked on this study. She holds a BA in social work and a master's in social science in social planning and administration. And she is the director of the Social Change Assistance Trust, which most of those in the room will know as SCAT, a human rights non-profit organization. And I should just point out that during the extraordinarily difficult times that we've experienced in these last couple of years, of course, being in that position in that kind of organization takes an enormous amount of time and energy. And add to that being the mother of 3 teenagers. And I think, the feat in coming to the end of the PhD is really extraordinary. So Jo's work involved in-depth interviews with 52 women in Lavender Hill, a review of media, social media, and film, and looked at the predominant problems that are faced by women in these areas. So we know that South Africa, women in South Africa experience extraordinarily high levels of violence, and this area is an area that is particularly prone to violence. And so what Jo was really interested in is how are women engaging in solving issues in and around the law. So a context of neglect, of high levels of violence and insecurity, with patriarchy as a dominant paradigm affecting women's choices in problem solving. What the study shows is that neighborhoods like Lavender Hill cannot be viewed as homogeneous, and the thesis develops typologies tied to differentiated approaches to problem solving. This work in the field of law and society extends understandings of legal consciousness and women's agency in places where choice is constrained by local context and profound institutional failure. And Jo's external examiners particularly emphasized the importance of the work that she's done in shaping social interventions and policy making. So well done to you, Jo Harding.
Thank you very much, Dee. Next is Ibrahim Harun, who was supervised by Professor Salvatore Mancuso, a colleague who was with us. I don't know whether he's managed to join in now to introduce. I do not see him here.
Dean, there are some words in text available for you, and I see Prof. Odo has also joined.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Will you speak to Ibrahim, Professor Odo?
Yes,
certainly. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So Ibrahim has certain words that stand out in capital letters when I think of the work of taking his thesis to conclusion. And those words include resilience, equanimity, incisiveness, in-depth knowledge of his subject, engaged citizenship, and he is entrepreneurial. Ibrahim has managed to keep his PhD dream alive through numerous obstacles, including the loss of his first supervisor at UWC to death. Then he tried again at UCT and lost his first supervisor at UCT to resignation. And through so many obstacles, he has managed to complete a very comprehensive thesis on the subject of federalism as an instrument for peace in Somalia, in which he has carried out highly incisive analysis and in-depth examination of the prospects of federalism for achieving peace in Somalia. Ibrahim, you've done an excellent work, and your conduct throughout the grueling experience you've had on your PhD journey has been exemplary. You've handled yourself with restraint, self-control, and you have always had faith and trust that things will work out. I would like to congratulate you on behalf of Professor Mancuso and also on behalf of Dr. Oluwole Kunuji, who stepped in to assist with the completion of your supervision. Well done, and enjoy the fruits of your labor. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you, Ada. The next is Attila Kiesler, who was supervised by Associate Professor Kathy Powell, who has been kind enough to and generous enough to attend and come to introduce Attila, although she's bereaved at the moment. Thank you, Professor Powell.
Thank you very much, Dean. It's a great honor and privilege to do this job. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Attila was my first thesis baby, the first person I've supervised for a doctorate, and I really lucked out getting him. I often wonder what it had been like if I'd ended up with a supervisee like myself, and I think I would have chucked in academia. In Attila, I had somebody who was non-stop enthusiastic about his task, diligent, prompt. When he couldn't meet deadlines, he would let me know in advance. He would make alternative arrangements. When we made appointments, he would send me an Outlook invite for that appointment. There was one point when he was sharing his thesis document with me via Google Docs. This guy was on top of the job. I just basically had to sit at my end and read what he was sending in. So first of all, thank you to Attila for being a very easy person to supervise, and thank you for your professionalism. Secondly, the topic and Attila's way of handling it were very exciting. He actually tackled something that terrifies me, which is legal theory, new legal theory in international law applied to suggest the change of a rule in customary international law. That is not for the faint of heart. And it involved looking at a whole lot of international law theory that quite frankly intimidates me, and I told him so at the time. So we worked together trying to find our way through the various complications and confusions, and there is a lot of it. And Attila came up with a theory that the use of force by states against a non-state actor in another territory was now acceptable under customary international law. And the third thing that I think is worth noting, and what made supervision of Attila such a joy, was I have never met anybody who gets so excited to find his own mistakes. When I was doing a doctorate and my committee told me, about something I'd got wrong, I mean, that was me out for 2 weeks of misery and distress and depression and stuff. And Attila, when you showed him where his argument failed or where there was a contradiction or where there was a problem, would get genuinely excited. You say, that's fantastic. Thank you. Wow, I would never have thought of that. So it's just lovely to have a generous personality to work with. And I'm sure that in his further work, and I hope he continues in academia, that he will pass that gift on and use it with the people that he teaches and with his colleagues. And I think that UCT has, in producing this particular thesis baby, UCT has done academia a favor. And thank you to Attila for working with me.
Thank you, Kathy. The next is Omowamiwa Kolawole. Again, Professor D. Smythe was the supervisor.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Danwood. So Wami Kolawole, Wami's dissertation is titled "The Right to Health as a Claim on Dignity, Implications for State Accountability in Nigeria." Wami came to this dissertation with an LLB degree from the University of Lagos and an LLM from the University of Cape Town, which already started to dabble with questions at the intersection between health and law. But doing an interdisciplinary dissertation of any real worth that can really call itself interdisciplinary really requires a depth of interdisciplinary or of disciplinary knowledge that requires a lot of work. And in Wami's case, what this meant was that he also registered for a Master's in Public Health at the university's Faculty of Health Sciences. So throughout most of the degree, Wami has been registered both for a Master's in Public Health and for the PhD degree. And the resulting dissertation really really shows the value of this hard work. So his dissertation focuses on the nature of human dignity and the implications of its centrality to the realization of the right to health in Nigeria. It explores pre-existing notions of human dignities as capabilities, as well as an alternative communitarian framing, examining the implications for understanding human dignity in the Nigerian context. He argues that the nature of human dignity in Nigeria is predicated on a social compact where individuals and communities accede to the preservation of the state on the condition that it will manage its power and economic resources for the fulfillment of the welfare of every Nigerian. He argues that the right to health must therefore not be based on the convenience of the Nigerian state. For this to happen, the judiciary has to play a pivotal role in ensuring socioeconomic justice and state accountability. And Wami really goes a lot of the way towards explaining and describing and developing those tools. His examiners commended his dissertation as one that is rich and deep, that makes an important, individual and rigorous new contribution to this field of knowledge. I think for Wami, as for many of the people who are in this room, the last couple of years have been extraordinarily difficult. For many of us, it has involved loss and illness, and really a lot of pain and a lot of difficulty. And I really have to commend you, Wami, for also for your resilience, for your hard work, keeping your eye on the prize, and for the really excellent outcomes that you've achieved. Well done.
Thank you, Dee. Charlene Musiza was supervised by Associate Professor Tobias Schonvetter. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Dean. Thanks for having me. And let me start off by quickly congratulating all graduates really here in the room today. Well, very well done to everybody. But I have the distinct pleasure here today to introduce one of you, and that is Charlene Musiza, who I have known since 2017 when she joined us as a PhD student. And ever since, we have really worked in a variety of ways together, not only in the typical supervisor-student capacity. And I must say, I enjoyed every single minute of it. So among other things, she worked for a time as a research assistant in the intellectual property unit here at UCT. And then more recently, she was also a research fellow with our flagship project, the Open African Innovation Research Project, OpenIN. Now, the title of her PhD thesis is, I find, quite self-explanatory and as follows. It's the role of trademarks and geographical indication in advancing economic development in developing countries in Africa and investigation into Zimbabwe and South Africa. In particular, her thesis investigates the potential role of trademark and geographical indications for small-scale producers in Africa. And what I find perhaps most excitingly about this thesis is that it also contains an exploratory case study on the potential of adopting a mark regime for Chipinge coffee in Zimbabwe. It discusses the perspectives of coffee growers and examines the options for protection under the trademark regime and under geographical indication law. Now, as all theses, this thesis will end up in our institutional repository here at UCT, Open UCT, and if what I just really could just describe very briefly excites you, I invite you to have a closer look at the thesis once it has been uploaded. And I'm mentioning this here because I will certainly point future generations of my own PhD students to this thesis as a model and a template for putting together a really good thesis and something to be very proud of. Now, I'm very, very happy for Charlene today, of course, who I have no doubt will make her mark in her field. Going forward, she is very dedicated. She is a very focused student, thorough, has acted as a role model really for many of the more junior PhD students in the team. And I guess equally importantly, she is just very much liked by all of us in the IP unit. And I really hope, and let me conclude my 2 minutes here with that, I really hope that she, like others that have come before, will kind of stay with us in the way that she will continue to connect with us in our weekly conversations at the IP unit, because if she doesn't, she will definitely be sorely missed, and it would be a pity. So Charlene, well done. Congratulations again from my side.
Thank you, Tobias. The next is Alois Rogazia, who was my student. Alois is a former magistrate from Tanzania. He wrote on the right to fair compensation for land acquired for petroleum activities. He was critiquing the law and practice in Tanzania, and practically he drew on John Rawls' theory of fairness and analyzed the jurisprudence of international human rights law to identify the elements of a fair land compensation regime that is suited to the context of petroleum projects. He argues in the thesis that while Tanzanian petroleum laws and practices recognize the duty to give fair compensation to the people affected by petroleum activities before acquiring their land, he highlights numerous shortcomings in these laws and practices and makes appropriate recommendations. One of the examiners is Professor Rembe, whom I know to be a very strict examiner. He was very impressed with the thesis that Alois wrote. It's very practical, it's very relevant to the policy and practice in Tanzania. Hopefully the government will have sight of it. It was a long journey in some ways, but also a very beneficial one, given the sacrifices that Alois made during the process. He started with Professor Mostert, whom we must acknowledge for the role that she played in getting this thesis all the way through to the proposal stage and after. And then I succeeded Professor Mostert myself. Alois is very hardworking, very resilient. I've learned something from every student. I guess everybody learns, every supervisor learns from each and every student. They're unique, they have unique strengths, and it's quite edifying when one goes through this journey to the last outcome that happens. So congratulations, Alois, and I would like to thank your family who were with you, who are with you here. You attended the informal graduation that took place at 2:30. Congratulations, it was a great pleasure working with you. Thank you. The next is Julian van Niekerk, who was supervised by Professor Jackie Yates. And Professor Jackie Yates is not here. Is Julian here? Julian is not here. The thesis was on, that's Jane. The thesis was on the development and reform of the rules regulating authority to contract on behalf of companies in South Africa and English law. So we do not have Julian here. So the next person is Grant. I don't know whether Professor Koda is here now, because the next two candidates are, yes. You start
I
with
am.
Grant.
Thank you very much. And there's Grant. You know who's who. It's such a special honor to have this opportunity, Dean. Thank you so much for arranging it. It is, in some ways, of course, it would be lovely to have this in addition to the major gathering, although even the informal graduation this afternoon was completely wonderful. But let me say that it's particularly lovely to be celebrating Grant this afternoon. Grant Caswell matriculated from Pinelands High School. He did his LLB at UCT, his LLM in Constitutional and Administrative Law in 2016, and I had the pleasure of supervising his minor dissertation. And he came back a year or so later and said he wanted to do a thesis on, and I'm going to read it, Financing Infrastructure at Multilateral Development Banks, MDBs, Global Administrative Law and Accountability Reforms in Infrastructure Project Financing in the BRICS bloc. Okay, so this is effectively, and to oversimplify it badly, this is about the infrastructural development that needs to take place and the financing thereof, and the role of the multilateral development banks in the region, particularly in Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the BRICS bloc. Dean, you referred to learning from each of your PhD students, and that always has been my situation as well. I've probably learned more from Grant than many of the PhD students that I've had. I would like to think that I knew a little bit about global administrative law and certainly South African administrative law, but of multilateral development banks and the role of financing, and particularly the accountability of the developers of infrastructure. That's the critical issue, and that's where administrative law comes in, because infrastructural developments in developing countries and in developed countries can have a major impact on human rights and the environment. And that is where Grant's work is a major contribution to scholarship. He had leaders in the field as his examiners, including Professor Danny Bradlow, who is, I think, internationally renowned in this area and holds a Saatchi chair at the University of Pretoria. Grant's commitment to this PhD is such that he gave up his paid employment towards the end of 2020 in order to complete this thesis, which he then submitted in about July last year. He's back in employment, I'm happy to say. So he's not unemployable as a result of having a PhD. But I had the delight of meeting his mum, his dad, and his grandmother, who doesn't look her proclaimed 83 years this afternoon on the plaza. So Grant, it has been a major pleasure working with you, and I know that our links will continue. Congratulations.
Thank you, Hugh. The next is Kate Dent, again, Professor Koda.
So Kate Dent, that's not Kate, on my screen at least. Kate Dent was born and raised in Pietermaritzburg. She did both of her first degrees, her LLB and her LLM cum laude, through the University of South Africa. And to a certain extent, and particularly because of the effects of COVID in the last 21 months, she has effectively done her PhD through distance learning. In her case, it has not been an obstacle at all. I've seldom come across a PhD student, interacting with a PhD student who has been as widely read, as deeply read, as thoughtful, and as resourceful as Kate Dent. She doubts herself a lot, so she reads and reads and reads. Now, her thesis is in the official title of the thesis is Lawfare and Legitimacy, the Wicked Problem of Judicial Resilience at a Time of the Judicialization of Politics. This is in South Africa with relation particularly to the Constitutional Court. I think everybody on this meeting, on this call, will know what lawfare is. It has become well known, if not notorious, in this country over the last 4 or 5 years. But the point that Kate Dent explored, and the wicked problem, and she exemplifies this by looking at the role of the public protector, both in the form of Thuli Madonsela and in the current form of the Busisiwe Mkhwebane. And that helps me to the point. The argument that Kate makes is that it is right and proper and the court's constitutional mandate to uphold the Constitution and to hold the executive accountable. But the courts must at the same time maintain their legitimacy and the public confidence and the confidence of the elected arm of government, parliament, and the executive. And we know in this country the sorry road that we have walked in this regard under former President Jacob Zuma. And the wicked problem is that the courts can be tempted to overreach themselves, to find for the Constitution, and then, in the case of the public protector, when the person changes, suddenly you sit with the precedent that you have created in the Nkandla judgment of the binding nature of the recommendations of the public protector. And what do you do when you get a public protector like we now have in place, who has been found wanting by the courts frequently? Kate Dent, her initial draft was 125,000 words, It had to be cut down to the mandatory 80,000 plus 10%. She succeeded in doing so. I really hope it's going to become a book. I had the delight of meeting her mum, her dad, and a friend of her mum's this afternoon. We celebrate you, Kate. I wept when I got the examiner's reports. It was a wonderful, wonderful moment. Thank you very much. I'll stop now.
Thanks, Hugh. We've finished with the doctoral graduates. We now have to recognize also 2 LLMs by research and 2 MPhils also by research. The 2 LLMs by research are Stacy Lay Manuel, who was supervised by Associate Professor Wahida Amin. The topic was the social legal significance of decriminalizing sex work in South Africa. The second is Ama Safo Adoma, who was supervised by Associate Professor Alistair Price on the topic exploring potential reforms to address the high cost of medical malpractice litigation in South Africa. The 2 research MPhils are Kelly Fortune, supervised by Dr. Simon Howell and Dr. Annette Absher, on a topic, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, subsistence cannabis cultivation in the changing legislative context in South Africa. The second is Damthanga Mashasha, who was supervised by Dr. Rob Morel on the topic steroids in the gym, the law, strong bodies, and masculinity in South Africa. So congratulations also to these graduates and graduates. Of course, we are also graduating 53 LLMs by coursework and dissertation, including 14 professional masters and the 3 LLB graduates and 1 postgraduate diploma recipient, of course. Let me also mention 2 special achievements by members of staff in the faculty who have been honored, and one of them will feature in the formal graduation that will take place this evening. The first is Professor Henry Mostert, who was elected to the College of Fellows at UCT. This is a distinguished recognition. It symbolizes the highest form of academic recognition within UCT. We have very few law professors who have been elected to the College of Fellows. Most of them are retired. So congratulations to Professor Mostert on this achievement. We also have Professor Philippe Joseph Salazar, who won the 2021 Book Award on the title Words Are Weapons Inside ISIS's Rhetoric of Terror, which was written in 2017. It was published in 2017. Professor Salazar is a distinguished professor of rhetoric and is within the faculty. This is a university-wide award where academics who have published books and monographs submit for consideration, and this 2021 Professor Salazar won the prize. It has received international acclaim, this book, and this is a deserving award for Professor Salazar. With these final announcements, I would like to invite all the graduates to put on your mics, and even the supervisors if you can, and let's clap hands in recognition of the graduating. Yeah. brings to an end. All the best. Have a nice day, great week, even a great festive season. And all the best with the graduation, formal graduation happening at 7:30. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, Dan Wood. Thank you for your kind words.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.